In 1348, a ship pulled into the port of Messina, Sicily. Most of the sailors on board were already dead. The ones who were still alive were covered in black, oozing boils that seeped blood and pus. They had fevers so high they were delirious. Within days, every sailor was dead. And within weeks, the disease had spread from the port into the city, then across Sicily, then across Italy, then across all of Europe. It would kill between 75 and 200 million people in 5 years, 1/3 to 1/2 of everyone alive on the continent. And it changed human civilization more profoundly than any war, any invention, or any revolution in history. This is the real story of the Black Death, and it is far stranger and far more consequential than you were ever taught in school. The bacterium responsible was Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas, which lived on rats, which lived on the ships that connected the trade routes of medieval Europe. When an infected flea bit a human, the bacteria entered the lymphatic system and began replicating explosively inside the lymph nodes, causing them to swell into the signature black buboes that gave the plague its name. The swellings could grow to the size of eggs or apples, usually appearing in the groin, armpit, or neck. They were excruciatingly painful and often burst open, leaking infectious fluid. But the bubonic form was not even the worst version. The pneumonic form attacked the lungs directly, allowing the disease to spread through coughing and breathing, person to person, without needing fleas or rats at all. Pneumonic plague was nearly 100% fatal if untreated. You could be healthy at breakfast and dead by dinner. A person could wake up feeling fine, develop a cough by mid-morning, and be dead before the sun went down. Medieval people had no understanding of germ theory. They blamed the plague on miasma, bad air rising from swamps and decay. They blamed the alignment of planets. They blamed the wrath of God punishing humanity for its sins. Doctors wore beak-shaped masks stuffed with flowers, camphor, and aromatic herbs, believing sweet smells would purify the corrupted air and ward off the disease. Some believed that sitting between 2 large fires would cleanse the air. Others believed that the answer was self-flagellation, publicly whipping themselves raw to earn God's forgiveness. Roving bands of flagellants traveled from town to town, whipping themselves bloody in town squares while crowds watched and prayed. And in one of history's most shameful and tragic episodes, Jewish communities across Europe were blamed for the plague and accused of poisoning wells. The conspiracy theory spread as fast as the disease itself. Thousands of Jewish people were massacred in pogroms across Germany, France, Switzerland, and Spain. In Strasbourg, 900 Jewish men, women, and children were burned alive in February 1349, before the plague had even reached the city. Entire communities that had existed for generations were annihilated. The Pope himself, Clement VI, issued official papal bulls condemning the violence and pointing out that Jewish people were dying of the plague at the same rate as everyone else. It made no difference. The scapegoating continued, driven by fear, grief, and the desperate human need to find someone to blame when the world seems to be ending. But here is what most people do not know about the Black Death. It transformed European society in ways that arguably created the modern world. Before the plague, Europe was a feudal society where most people were born, lived, and died on the same plot of land. Serfs were legally bound to their lord's estate. There was almost no social mobility. The church was the unquestioned authority on all matters of life, death, morality, and truth. Then, half the population died. Suddenly, there were not enough workers. Surviving peasants could demand higher wages, better living conditions, and the freedom to move between estates. For the first time in centuries, labor had leverage. Lords who refused to pay higher wages found their workers simply walking away to estates that would. In England, the Statute of Labourers in 1351 attempted to freeze wages at pre-plague levels. It failed spectacularly and contributed directly to the peasant revolt of 1381. The feudal system began to crumble. A middle class began to emerge, Workers began to accumulate economic power that had been unthinkable a generation earlier. And the authority of the church took a devastating hit. People had prayed for deliverance. They had flagellated themselves. They had attended Mass and confessed their sins and donated to the church. And God had killed half of them anyway. Faith did not waver overnight, but a seed of doubt was planted that would grow for centuries. Within 200 years, the Renaissance would bloom, humanism would rise, and the Reformation would split Christianity in ways that have never healed. All of it traceable, at least in part, to a bacterium carried by a flea, carried by a rat, carried by a ship that pulled into a Sicilian port on an autumn day in 1348. A single microscopic organism reshaped the entire trajectory of human civilization.